I gave up my life for a woman who wasn't even kind to me. I cared for my mother-in-law while she was dying of cancer. My husband was gone for a full year, and just before she died, she grabbed my hand and whispered, "Go back and dig." What I found buried destroyed everything I thought I knew. Before this story unfolds, subscribe if you believe loyalty should never be punished. Like this video if you've ever sacrificed for family, and comment below where you're watching from, because this truth needs to be heard. When my husband left, he didn't even look back. He stood at the front door with a single suitcase, his phone already in his hand, tapping nervously, as if somewhere else mattered more than the woman standing right in front of him. He said it was temporary, a work opportunity, a year, maybe less. His voice was calm, rehearsed, clean, the kind of tone people use when they've already made peace with a decision that will destroy someone else. Behind me, down the hallway, his mother coughed a deep, rattling cough that shook her entire frail body. Stage 4 cancer, terminal. The doctors had been clear, months, not years. "I'll send money," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You'll manage." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how I was supposed to manage being a full-time caregiver to a woman who never wanted me as a daughter, while also working, cooking, cleaning, and keeping myself together. But instead, I nodded boff because that's what I always did. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded too gentle for something so final. And just like that, I was alone, in a house that already felt like a grave dot. My mother-in-law Ruth had never liked me. She tolerated me, barely. From the moment my husband brought me home, she made it clear I was not what she imagined. I was too quiet, too independent, too much of something she couldn't name and didn't trust. Yet now, she needed me. Cancer stripped her of pride faster than it stripped her of strength. The woman who once criticized how I folded towels now couldn't lift her own arms. I bathed her, fed her, helped her to the bathroom, cleaned her vomit at 3 in the morning while she cried and apologized through cracked lips. Some nights, I slept on the floor beside her bed because she was afraid to die alone. Other nights, I cried silently in the kitchen, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My husband called once a week, sometimes less. "How's Mom?" he'd ask. Not "How are you?" Not "Are you coping?" Just "How's Mom?" "She's worse." I'd say, "Okay, keep me updated." Click. Months passed like that. Seasons changed outside, but inside the house, time stood still. The smell of antiseptic and sickness seeped into the walls. I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. Hollow eyes, hair always tied back, hands rough from constant washing. Ruth watched me more closely as her body failed. One afternoon, while I was spoon-feeding her soup, she suddenly said, "Why are you still here?" I froze. "You could have left," she continued, her voice thin but sharp. "Most women would have." I swallowed. "She needs someone," I said quietly. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, not pain tears, regret tears. "I wasn't good to you," she whispered. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. As her condition worsened, she became restless. She started asking strange questions, asking if I knew how to dig, asking if the ground in the backyard was still soft near the old oak tree. I thought it was the medication talking. The night she died, the house was eerily quiet. No coughing, no labored breathing, just silence. I was holding her hand when her fingers suddenly tightened around mine with surprising strength. Her eyes opened, clear, focused, urgent. She pulled me closer, her breath hot and shallow against my ear. "Go back," she whispered. I shook my head, tears spilling freely. "It's okay, you can rest." Her grip tightened. "And dig," she said, "before he comes back." Then her hand went limp, and Ruth was gone. I sat there for hours after the nurse pronounced her dead, staring at the wall, those words echoing in my head, "Go back and dig." At the time, I had no idea those words were about to change my life, or that my husband had been lying to me long before he ever walked out that door. The house didn't feel like a home after Ruth died. It felt like something hollowed out and left behind, walls still standing, furniture still in place, but the soul gone. The hospice nurse left quietly, offering condolences I barely heard. The sun rose and fell twice before I finally stood up from the chair beside Ruth's bed. My legs were stiff, my back aching, my fingers still curved as if they were holding her hand. I didn't cry right away. I was too numb. The silence was unbearable. For a year, my life had revolved around schedules, medications, meals, doctor visits, midnight alarms. Now there was nothing. No one calling my name. No coughing from the bedroom. No reason to rush. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee out of habit. It went cold, untouched on the counter. Her words kept circling in my head like a warning siren. Go back and dig before he comes back, before he comes back. That part bothered me the most. Why would she say that? What was so urgent that it couldn't wait for her own son? Why tell me? I tried to convince myself it was delirium. Cancer does that. Morphine does that. Dying people say strange things. But Ruth hadn't sounded confused. She had sounded afraid. That afternoon, I called my husband. She's gone, I said. There was a pause, a sharp inhale on the other end. Oh, he replied. Sorry, that was it. No questions. No talk of coming home early. No grief. I'll handle the arrangements, I told him. The funeral, everything. Okay, he said quickly. Just keep receipts. We'll talk when I get back. When I get back. He didn't say if. The funeral was small. Ruth had outlived most of her friends, and the ones who came looked more curious than sad, whispering behind gloved hands. They looked at me with a mix of pity and surprise, as if wondering why the daughter-in-law was the one standing at the front, greeting guests, while the son was nowhere to be found. I stood strong. I always did. That night, alone in the house again, I finally broke. I cried until my chest hurt, until my throat burned, until I slid down the wall and sat on the cold kitchen floor. Arms wrapped around my knees like a child. I did everything. I whispered to the empty room, everything. And for what? That was the moment I remembered the oak tree. The old oak in the backyard had been there longer than the house, thick roots pushing through the soil, branches stretching wide like arms. Ruth used to sit on the porch and stare at it for hours. I thought it was nostalgia now. I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I stood at the back door staring outside. The yard looked innocent enough. Frost still clung to the grass. Birds hopped around, unaware of secrets buried beneath their feet. You're being ridiculous, I told myself, but my feet moved anyway. I grabbed a shovel from the garage. The metal felt cold in my hands. I walked toward the oak tree slowly, my heart pounding harder with every step. The ground beneath the tree looked disturbed, not fresh, not recent, but uneven, like it had been dug and filled years ago. My stomach twisted. I pushed the shovel into the dirt. The first few inches were easy, soft, loose. I dug deeper. 10 minutes passed, then 20. My arms ached. Sweat soaked my shirt despite the cold air. I almost stopped, almost convinced myself this was pointless. When the shovel hit something solid, clang, the sound echoed too loudly in the quiet yard. I froze. I dug faster, panic and adrenaline fueling me. Dirt flew behind me as I uncovered the corner of a metal box. My breath caught. It was an old military-style lockbox, rusted around the edges, heavy and sealed tight. My hands shook as I wiped dirt from the lid. There was a lock, but it was already broken, as if someone had forced it open once and then closed it again. I dragged the box out of the hole and just stared at it for a long moment. This was real. Whatever Ruth wanted me to find, this was it. I carried the box into the house, leaving a trail of dirt across the floor. I set it on the dining table, the same table where I'd served Ruth her meals, where my husband used to sit scrolling on his phone. I lifted the lid. Inside were documents, envelopes, a small velvet pouch, and on top of everything, a letter. My name was written on it. Printed, not typed. Written. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. I sat down slowly, afraid my legs would give out, and opened the envelope. The letter was dated 6 years ago. If you are reading this, it began, then I am either gone, or too weak to tell you the truth myself. My heart hammered in my chest. Ruth wrote about regret, about mistakes, about protecting her son for too long. Then I read the sentence that made my blood run cold. My son is not the man you think he is. I stopped breathing. The letter went on to describe lies I had never suspected, money hidden, property transferred, accounts created under false names, and a betrayal so deep it made my stomach turn. At the bottom of the letter, one line was underlined twice. Everything you need is in this box. Use it before he comes back. I closed the letter slowly and looked at the rest of the contents. Bank statements, property, deeds, and a passport. Not mine. Not Ruth's. My husband's. With a different name. My hands fell into my lap as the weight of the truth began to settle. The man I married. The year he disappeared. The coldness. The urgency in Ruth's final words. It was all connected, and whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer just a caregiver. I was standing at the edge of a truth that would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. The lockbox sat on the dining table like a living thing, silent but heavy with intention. I turned off every light in the house except the one above it, as if darkness might swallow the truth if I wasn't watching closely enough. Every time the wind rattled the windows, my heart jumped. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps. I kept thinking my husband would walk through the door, not because he said he was coming back early, but because guilt has a way of arriving without warning. I spread everything out slowly, piece by piece, the way a detective might at a crime scene. The bank statements came first. There were accounts I had never seen before, offshore accounts, domestic accounts under LLCs I didn't recognize, transfers made in small, careful amounts over years, money that had quietly bled out of our marriage. While I balanced grocery budgets and delayed dentist appointments, I did the math. My hands started shaking. Halfway through, over $300,000 gone, hidden, moved, while I trusted him, while I cooked his meals, while I cleaned his clothes, while I defended him every time someone hinted he was distant or secretive. My chest felt tight, like the room was running out of air. Next were property deeds. One house in another state, a condo near the coast, both purchased in cash, both dated during our marriage, both listed under a name that was almost his but not quite, a variation, a lie polished just enough to pass. I remembered every argument we'd ever had about money. Things are tight right now. We need to be careful. Next year will be better. I had believed him. God help me, had believed him. Then I picked up the passport. I stared at the photo for a long time. It was him, same eyes, same mouth, same faint scar near his eyebrow, but the name was different, so was the date of birth. I flipped through the pages, stamps from countries he'd never mentioned, travel dates that didn't match his supposed business trips. One stamp made my stomach drop. It overlapped with the year he was gone now. This wasn't new. This was practiced. I sat back in the chair, heart pounding so hard it hurt. And suddenly Ruth's behavior over the years made sense. The coldness, the tension, the way she watched him when she thought no one noticed that she had known. She had lived with the weight of it, and in the end, she chose me. I picked up the velvet pouch last. Inside was a flash drive and a small gold key. No label, no explanation. Just tools, weapons, maybe. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop at first. Nothing happened. Then a folder opened automatically. Videos, audio, files, scanned documents. My throat went dry. The first video was dated 4 years ago. Ruth was sitting at the kitchen table. This kitchen table, her hands folded, her posture stiff. She looked healthier then, stronger, but her eyes were heavy with exhaustion. "If you're seeing this," she said into the camera. Then I didn't have the courage to stop him while I still could. She swallowed hard. "My son has been lying for most of his adult life. To you, to the law, to himself." I watched frozen as she explained everything. The fake identity, the financial manipulation, the second relationship he had maintained under the other name, how he used caregiving, sympathy, and distance as shields. And then came the sentence that broke me. "He chose you because you are loyal, and he counted on that loyalty to keep you quiet." Tears streamed down my face unchecked. Ruth explained how she confronted him years ago, how he begged her to stay silent, how he told her it was temporary, that he would fix everything. She didn't believe him, but she loved him. So she waited. Cancer stole her time before she could fix her mistake. Before the video ended, she leaned closer to the camera. "You are stronger than you think," she said softly, "and he is more afraid of you than you realize." The screen went black. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms into my eyes. Everything I thought my life was, my marriage, my sacrifices, my patience, had been a carefully curated illusion. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. Instead, something inside me went very still, very clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting, I was deciding. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. Enough to hear the pause on the other end of the line when I mentioned multiple identities and hidden assets. "We'll need documentation," he said carefully. "I have it," I replied. Then I called my husband. He answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said casually, like nothing in the world was wrong. "I found something," I said. Silence. "Found what?" he asked. I looked at the lockbox. "At Mom's house," I continued. "She left me instructions. Another pause, longer this time. What kind of instructions? He asked, his voice tighter now. To dig, I said calmly. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then he spoke, and his voice was no longer casual. Don't touch anything, he said. I'll be home soon. Soon. For the first time, the word didn't comfort me, it warned me. I ended the call without replying, and as I stood there in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by truth and betrayal and proof buried both in the ground and in my heart, I understood something Ruth never got the chance to do. I had time, and I was going to use every second of it. The moment I hung up the phone, my hand started shaking, not from fear, but from the delayed release of it, the kind that comes after you realize the danger was real all along. You just hadn't been looking straight at it. I locked every door in the house, not because I thought he'd show up that night, but because instinct told me something had shifted. The balance of power had tilted, and he knew it. I didn't go to work that day. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open. Documents spread around me like a second skin. I made copies of everything, physical copies, digital backups, cloud storage with passwords, even I would forget without effort. I emailed encrypted files to an account I created under a name no one knew. I left a sealed envelope with a trusted neighbor, someone Ruth had known for years, with instructions not to open it unless something happened to me. For the first time since my husband left, I acted like a woman who understood she might not be safe. And that realization hurt more than any betrayal. By noon, my phone started buzzing. Missed calls. Texts. Double quotes. Why would you dig that up? You misunderstood. We need to talk. Don't involve anyone else. I didn't reply. Instead, I rewatched Ruth's videos, listening for things I might have missed. The pauses, the moments where her eyes darted toward the door, the subtle fear she tried to hide. I realized something chilling. She hadn't just been protecting herself, she'd been protecting me. The lawyer called back in the afternoon. What you're describing, he said carefully, is serious. Identity fraud, marital asset concealment, potential criminal exposure. Whose exposure? I asked. His, he replied without hesitation. The words settled into my chest like a stone. Not ours, not mine. His. That distinction mattered more than he knew. That evening, I finally replied to my husband. Me, I know about the accounts. Him, you don't know what you think you know. Me, I know about the properties. Him, those aren't what they look like. Me, I know about the other name. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then my phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Where are you right now? He asked immediately. At home, I said. Where else would I be? You shouldn't have gone through her things, he snapped. That was private. A sharp laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Private, I said. You built an entire second life and you're worried about privacy. He exhaled hard. You're emotional. You've been under stress, caring for Mom. Don't you dare, I interrupted, my voice low and steady. Don't you dare use her as a shield. Silence. Then, softer, almost pleading. I was going to explain everything when I got back. When? I asked. After another year, another identity. You wouldn't understand, he said. I closed my eyes. I understand perfectly, I replied. You thought I was too loyal to leave, too tired to question, too busy cleaning up your messes to notice you were poisoning the foundation. That's not fair, he said quickly. Isn't it? I asked, because your mother seemed to think so. The sound he made then wasn't anger, it was fear. She told you things, he said. She showed me things, I corrected, and she told me to act before you came back. A long pause. Listen to me, he said slowly. We're still married. What you do affects both of us. That was the moment the last thread snapped. No, I said quietly. What you did affects you. What I do now is about survival. I hung up. That night, I barely slept. Every headlight passing the house made my heart jump. Every unfamiliar sound felt amplified. I realized how naive I had been, living in a marriage where I assumed safety was guaranteed just because there was a ring on my finger. In the early hours of the morning, an email came through, from an address I didn't recognize. It contained one sentence. You should have left the box buried. I stared at the screen, cold spreading through my veins. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Then, I packed a bag. Not to run, but to be ready. I moved my most important documents, my passport, and the copies of Ruth's evidence into a small fireproof safe. I placed it in the trunk of my car. hidden beneath spare blankets and tools. I memorized license plates outside my house. I started checking my rearview mirror when I drove. This wasn't paranoia. This was adaptation. 2 days later, I received a notification from my bank, a large transfer attempt. From our joint account, I called immediately. Freeze it, I said. Effective now. May I ask why? The representative asked. Because the person attempting to drain it is not authorized anymore, I replied. That afternoon, my husband called again. This time, his voice was sharp, controlled, dangerous. What did you do? He demanded. I protected myself, I said. You have no idea who you're messing with, he replied. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding but voice steady. You're right, I said. I didn't, but your mother did, and now I do. Another silence. Then, quietly, I'm coming home. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the wall, letting the weight of it sink in. He was coming back, not as a husband, not as a son in mourning, but as a man, whose secrets had been unearthed. And I knew something else too, something Ruth must have known in her final moments. Men like him don't come back to apologize, they come back to control the damage, and this time, I wasn't going to let him. I knew the exact moment he arrived. Not because I saw his car pull into the driveway, but because the air inside the house changed. It felt heavier, like the walls themselves were bracing for impact. I was standing in the kitchen, rinsing a mug I hadn't actually used, when I heard the familiar sound of tires crunching against gravel. My hands went still. For a year, this house had been mine alone, mine and Ruth's, a place of sickness, sacrifice, quiet endurance. Now the man who abandoned us was back, walking toward the door, as if he still belonged. I didn't rush to greet him. I dried my hands slowly. I straightened my shoulders. I reminded myself of the truth. I was not the same woman he left behind. The front door opened. Without a knock. Of course it did. He stepped inside, suitcase in hand, scanning the room like a stranger assessing damage. He looked thinner, sharper. His eyes moved too quickly, calculating, searching for signs of what I knew. Hi, he said, forcing a smile that never reached his eyes. I said nothing. You look tired, he continued, setting the suitcase down. This year must have been hard. The audacity of it hit me so hard I almost laughed. She died, I said simply. He nodded, his jaw tightening. I know, you weren't here, I added. I had no choice, he replied quickly. You know that. I turned to face him fully for the first time. Did I ask? Because from where I stood bathing your mother, lifting her, watching her fade, you had plenty of choices. You just didn't choose us. Something dark flickered across his face. I didn't come here to argue, he said. I came to fix this. Fix. The word sounded hollow. I read the letter, I said. He froze. I watched the moment, his mask crack, the slight tightening around his eyes, the involuntary swallow. He hadn't expected me to say it so directly. She shouldn't have written that, he said quietly. She wrote it 6 years ago, I replied. She just didn't trust herself to give it to me while you were alive to stop her. Anger flashed now. She was sick, he snapped. She was paranoid. She didn't understand everything. She understood enough, I said. Enough to hide proof. Enough to warn me. Enough to tell me to act before you came back. He stepped closer. Too close. You think you're smarter than me now? He asked. You think digging up a box makes you powerful? I didn't move. No, I said calmly. I think it makes me informed. His eyes darted to the dining table. The box wasn't there anymore. I watched the realization sink in. You moved it, he said. Double quotes. Yes. Where? Somewhere safe. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted. I'm your wife. Those are marital assets, and you committed fraud to hide them. The word fraud landed hard. He laughed then, but it wasn't real laughter. It was sharp, defensive. You're not going to do anything, he said. You won't. You don't have the stomach for it. That was when I felt something inside me finally settle. For years, he had mistaken my patience for weakness. You're wrong, I said softly. I already did. His smile vanished. What? I spoke to a lawyer, I continued. I froze our joint accounts. I made copies of everything, and I documented every threat you've sent since I found the box. His face drained of color. You wouldn't, he said. I did, I replied. And if anything happens to me, everything goes public. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. You're bluffing, he said finally. I walked to the hallway table and picked up my phone. I opened an email draft and turned the screen toward him. A list of recipients filled the scrutiny's financial institutions, and one journalist Ruth had trusted years ago, scheduled, timed, automatic. His breath hitched. "What do you want?" he asked. The question stunned me. For so long, my wants had been buried under duty, under loyalty, under survival. "I want a divorce," I said. "I want full disclosure of every account, every property, every identity, and I want it done legally." "You'll destroy me," he whispered. I met his eyes. "You destroyed yourself." He sank into a chair, rubbing his face with both hands. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, not powerful, not in control, just exposed. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said quietly. "It started as a way to protect us." "From what?" I asked. "From failure," he admitted. "From being ordinary." I thought of Ruth, lying in that bed, gripping my hand with her last strength. "I was ordinary," I said, "and I was loyal, and you used that." He didn't deny it. That night, he slept in the guest room. I locked my door. In the days that followed, the house became a battlefield of silence. We communicated through lawyers. He tried negotiating, then threatening, then pleading. None of it worked. The truth was already free. One afternoon, as I packed Ruth's remaining belongings, I found something else hidden beneath her sweaters. A small notebook. Inside were handwritten entries, dates, amounts, names, a ledger, proof she'd been quietly tracking him for years. At the back of the notebook was a final message, written in shaky handwriting. "You were never weak. You were waiting. Finish this." I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest. For the first time since the cancer diagnosis, since the abandonment, since the betrayal, I felt something like peace. Because no matter what came next, courtrooms, consequences, public exposure, I knew this. I had honored Ruth in the only way that mattered. I listened, and I didn't look away. The legal process didn't begin with a courtroom. It began with paperwork, stacks of it, forms, that asked me to reduce a decade-long marriage into checkboxes and timelines, dates of separation, dates of abandonment, financial disclosures, asset histories. Each page felt like peeling back another layer of skin, exposing things I had once believed were private, sacred, untouchable. My lawyer warned me early on. "This won't be quick," she said, her tone firm but compassionate. "Men who build double lives don't let them go easily." She was right. The first official response from my husband's attorney arrived within a week. It was aggressive, accusatory, painted me as an unstable caregiver, emotionally compromised by grief and exhaustion. They implied Ruth's evidence was manipulated, that I had misunderstood, that I was acting out of spite. I expected to feel hurt. Instead, I felt something else, clarity, because people only attack like that when the truth scares them. I handed over everything, the bank statements, the deeds, the passport, the flash drive, Ruth's letters, the notebook ledger. My lawyer's eyebrows lifted higher with each item. "This," she said quietly, tapping the ledger, "changes everything." Within days, subpoenas went out. Banks froze accounts my husband didn't even know I knew about. One property sale was halted mid-process. Another was flagged for investigation due to identity discrepancies. The quiet, invisible web he'd spun for years started unraveling thread by thread. That's when the pressure campaign began. He stopped trying to intimidate me directly. Instead, he sent people. A mutual friend called, voice tight. "He's not well," she said. "He says you're trying to ruin him." Another told me I should think about forgiveness, because marriage is about compromise. Someone else suggested I was Ruth by exposing her son. That one almost made me laugh. I blocked numbers. I stopped explaining myself. I had already lived a year without support. I could survive opinions. What I didn't expect was the media interest. The journalist Ruth had trusted, the one listed in my email draft, out after receiving a tip from a financial institution. She didn't ask for gossip. She asked for proof. And I had it. We met in a quiet cafe far from my house. I watched her expression change as she read through documents, listened to audio clips, saw the pattern emerge. "This isn't just a divorce," she said slowly. "This is a long-term fraud case." I nodded. "I know. Why didn't you go public sooner?" she asked. I thought of Ruth's trembling hand, her urgency, her regret. "Because I needed to understand it first," I replied, "and because my safety mattered." The article didn't come out right away. Investigations never do. But word spread faster than ink. My husband lost clients, then partners, then credibility. The second identity he'd built so carefully began collapsing under scrutiny. That other life, the one he thought was untouchable, started demanding answers he couldn't give. At home, the tension was unbearable. We were no longer pretending. He paced the house at night, took calls in whispers, slammed doors. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me like he was trying to remember who I used to be. "You planned this," he said one evening, standing in the doorway of the living room. "No," I replied calmly. "You did," he scoffed. "You think you're some kind of hero now." I looked up from my laptop. "No," I said. "I think I'm finally honest." That night, he didn't come home. The next morning, I noticed something missing. Ruth's notebook. My heart dropped. I searched the house, moving faster with each empty drawer, each shelf cleared too neatly. Panic rose in my throat, hot and sharp. He had taken it. I called my lawyer immediately. "Don't panic," she said. "Do you have copies?" "Yes," I replied. "Multiple." "Good," she said. "Then what he did is obstruction." The word felt heavy. Criminal. By the time he returned that evening, the police had already been notified. He walked in and saw them standing in the hallway. His face went pale. "You did this," he hissed. "You stole evidence," I replied. "I protected myself." The officers were calm, professional. They took statements. They logged the report. He handed over the notebook with shaking hands, his anger barely contained beneath forced compliance. After they left, he collapsed onto the couch. "You're enjoying this," he muttered. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm enduring it." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something that made my chest ache. I was no longer afraid of him. The fear had burned out, replaced by something steadier. Resolve. Weeks passed. Then months. Court dates were scheduled. Delays followed. More evidence surfaced, some of it from unexpected places. An accountant, a former associate, even a woman tied to the second identity who came forward. After the article draft leaked internally, each revelation confirmed the same truth. Ruth hadn't just suspected, she had been building a case. And she had chosen me to finish it. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I found something I'd overlooked. An old toolbox. At the bottom, beneath rusted nails and broken handles, was a small envelope taped to the inside wall. By name again. Inside was a key. Not gold this time. Steel. Attached was a note in Ruth's handwriting. "The last thing he thinks is his alone." I stared at it for a long time, my mind racing. Then I remembered. A storage unit, one he'd forbidden me from touching years ago, said it held business records and junk. The key was labeled with a number. The unit still existed, and legally, as his spouse at the time it was rented, I had access. I closed my hand around the key. Some truths don't come buried in the ground. Some are hidden where arrogance assumes no one will look, and I was done respecting assumptions that never protected me. I didn't go to the storage unit right away, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because I finally understood the pattern of my husband's life. He thrived on urgency when he controlled it. He panicked when someone else moved slowly. So I waited. I let the silence stretch. I let him wonder whether I had found the key, whether I knew what it opened, whether the last place he believed was safe was already exposed. For the first time, patience was a weapon in my hands. 3 days later, I drove there. The storage facility sat on the edge of town, tucked behind an industrial strip most people ignored. Gray metal doors, faded numbers, a place meant to disappear things. I parked far from the entrance and sat in my car for a moment, breathing deeply, grounding myself. Ruth's voice echoed in my head, not from the recordings, but from memory. Her quiet certainty, her regret sharpened into resolve. Finish this. The unit number matched the key. The lock turned. Easily. Too easily. That should have been my first warning. The metal door screeched as I lifted it, the sound slicing through the still air. Inside were neatly stacked boxes, plastic bins labeled in my husband's handwriting, shelving units bolted into place. Everything was organized with the precision of someone who believed order could control chaos. I stepped inside and let the door roll shut behind me. The first box I opened contained electronics, old phones, laptops, hard drives, some cracked, some pristine, each one labeled with dates. I swallowed. This wasn't just financial deception, this was documentation. The second box held files, not business files, people. Names, photos, notes, women he'd dated under the other identity, some long-term, some brief. Patterns emerged quickly. Same promises, same excuses, same disappearances. I felt sick, not from jealousy, from recognition. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd practiced betrayal. The third box made my knees buckle. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Unsent. Addressed to me. Sat on the concrete floor and picked one at random. The envelope was yellowed with age, corners worn. I don't know how to stop, it began. I read letter after letter, my hands trembling more with each one. Confessions he never sent, apologies he never meant to deliver, plans to tell me everything that never materialized because lying was easier than accountability. One letter stopped me cold. If Mom ever tells you, I'll deny it. I'll make you doubt yourself, and it will work because you love me. I dropped the paper like it burned. He had known. He had planned for this moment, and Ruth had known he would. That's why she didn't confront him publicly. That's why she waited. That's why she trusted me, not because I was naive, but because I was thorough. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and opened the final container. Inside was a fireproof safe. My heart pounded. I tried the steel key. It fit. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing stacks of documents tied with rubber bands, a second passport, another name, and a USB drive marked with a single word: insurance. It didn't need to plug it in to understand. This was his contingency. Evidence he'd collected against others, financial trails, recorded conversations, deals gone wrong. A man who didn't trust anyone, not even himself, to remain safe without leverage. And then I saw something that made my breath catch. A handwritten note taped inside the safe door. Not his handwriting, Ruth's. If you're here, then he underestimated you. Again. Tears blurred my vision. She had been here before. She had seen all of this. She had closed the safe and walked away, carrying the weight of knowing her son was dangerous, not violent, not reckless, but calculated. The kind of man who could destroy lives quietly and sleep at night. I took photos of everything. Then I did something he never expected. I didn't take the contents. I took the safe itself. It was heavy, awkward, but adrenaline fueled me. I loaded it into my trunk, covered it, locked the car, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Her reaction was immediate. This, she said, staring at the contents after we opened it together, is catastrophic for him. For us, I asked. She shook her head. No, for him. That distinction again. Days later, the confrontation came, not in the house, not with shouting, but in a conference room filled with legal professionals. My husband sat across from me, eyes hollow, posture rigid. His attorney looked like a man trying to hold back a flood with paperwork. You accessed private property. His attorney argued weakly. Marital property, mine replied, rented during the marriage, with shared funds. My husband finally looked at me. You went to the unit, he said. Yes. You took it all, he said. No, I corrected calmly. I took what mattered. For the first time, he looked genuinely lost. The negotiations shifted instantly. No more threats, no more accusations, only damage control. Assets returned, properties surrendered, accounts disclosed. A settlement that favored me so heavily. His attorney stopped, objecting halfway through. But the most important moment came when my lawyer slid one final document across the table, a sworn statement. Public disclosure. Full cooperation with investigators. He stared at it like it was a death sentence. If I sign this, he said hoarsely, there's no going back. I met his eyes steadily. There never was. He signed. When it was over, when the room emptied and the noise faded, I sat alone in my car and finally allowed myself to cry, not from pain, but from release. The year I gave to Ruth hadn't been stolen. It had been invested in truth, in justice, in myself. As I drove home, I passed the oak tree. The hole was still there, partially filled, the earth uneven. I thought of Ruth's last words, go back and dig. She hadn't just meant the ground, she had meant the truth, and I had. The aftermath didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like dust settling after a collapse, quiet, unavoidable, and everywhere. One morning I woke up and realized no one was calling me anymore. No lawyers demanding documents, no frantic texts, no late-night pacing in the hallway. The silence felt foreign at first, almost dangerous, like the calm after a storm when you're waiting for the second wave to hit. But a DIDN, single quotes T. Instead. The world began reacting. The article was published on a Tuesday morning. I didn't read it right away. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching steam curl into the air, grounding myself in something ordinary. When I finally opened my laptop, my name wasn't in the headline. His was. That mattered more than I expected. The piece laid everything out, not sensationally, not cruelly, but with precision. Financial trails, false identities, shell companies, years of deception. Ruth's role was described carefully, respectfully. My role even more so. The unnamed spouse who cooperated fully with investigators. That was me. Not a villain, not a hysterical widow, not a scorned woman seeking revenge, a witness. Within hours, messages flooded in, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some from strangers. I believe you. Thank you for telling the truth. My sister went through something similar. He did this to us too. That last one stopped me. A woman reached out, one of the names I'd seen in the storage unit files. She didn't accuse me. She didn't beg. She simply thanked me. I thought I was crazy, she wrote. I thought it was my fault. I stared at the screen, tears spilling freely. No one ever talks about the collateral damage of a man like that, the invisible casualties, the women who doubt their own memories because manipulation leaves no bruises. That week, I met with investigators. Federal ones. They were calm, methodical. They asked questions. I answered without hesitation. I handed over copies of everything. When they thanked me for my cooperation, something inside me finally unclenched. This was bigger than my marriage. This was accountability. Home. The house began to change. Not physically at first, but emotionally. The air felt lighter. I opened windows, let sunlight in, packed away reminders I no longer needed. I donated clothes, threw away old arguments written on sticky notes in my head. One afternoon, while clearing out the guest room, I found something unexpected. A photo. Me and Ruth, taken years ago at a family gathering I barely remembered. She was smiling, actually smiling, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I sat on the bed and held it for a long time. I get it now, I whispered. The lawyer finalized the settlement 2 weeks later. I kept the house. The accounts. The properties were sold or transferred. I walked away financially secure for the first time in my adult life, not because of a man, but because I refused to stay silent. My husband, my ex, didn't fight it. He could single quotes that the investigation expanded beyond us. Others came forward. Deals unraveled. His second life collapsed entirely, exposed to daylight that burned everything it touched. The last time I saw him was in passing, a hallway, neutral ground. He looked older, smaller. He didn't speak, neither did I. Some stories don't need closure, they need distance. That night, I went into the backyard. The oak tree stood the same as always, steady, rooted, unmoved by human secrets. I filled in the hole completely, patting the earth flat with my hands. When I was done, I planted something new beside it, a small flowering shrub. I don't know why, maybe because life insists on continuing, even where pain once lived. As I stood there, my phone buzzed. A message from the journalist. They're calling you a whistleblower, she wrote. Do you want to speak? I looked at the house, at the windows glowing softly from inside, at the yard that had once held a secret meant to protect lies. No, I replied. I've said enough. Later that evening, I sat down and wrote Ruth a letter. Not because she would read it, but because I needed to finish the conversation. I told her thank you. I told her I forgave her, told her she was right about me. Then I burned the letter in the fireplace and watched the smoke rise. For the first time in years, I slept without locking my door, not because the world was suddenly safe, but because I thought the hardest part was over. That was my mistake. Healing has a strange way of circling back, of tapping you on the shoulder just when you think you've finally exhaled. It doesn't come with chaos. This time, no lawyers, no threats, no headlines. It comes quietly, wearing the face of something unfinished. For me, it came in the form of a phone call. A woman introduced herself as Ruth's younger sister. I hadn't known she existed. I didn't want to interfere before, she said carefully, but now that everything is public, there's something you should know. We met the next day. She looked like Ruth, same sharp eyes, same posture, but without the bitterness time had carved into her sister. She slid a small envelope across the table. Ruth asked me to give this to you if things went the way they did. She said. My name was written on it again. Inside was a single page. If you're reading this, then you've already done the hardest part. Ruth explained that the box, the storage unit, the evidence, those were only pieces of the truth. The rest was more personal, more painful. She wrote about the moment she realized her son wasn't just lying to survive, he was lying to feel powerful, that control was his addiction, and that the most dangerous thing for someone like him wasn't exposure, it was being ignored. Then came the line that made my chest ache. He will try to come back to you in another form, not as a husband, not as a threat, but as a regret. I felt a chill. Ruth warned me that when everything was stripped away, money, status, identity, he would seek the one person who had known him before all the masks. Me. Not to reconcile. To be witnessed. Do not give him that, she wrote. It is the last thing he wants. I folded the letter slowly, understanding settling into my bones. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hi, he said softly. It's me. I closed my eyes. I won't take long, he continued quickly. I needed to hear your voice. The manipulation was subtler now. No anger, no blame, just vulnerability. I lost everything, he said, and I finally understand why. I said nothing. I see now what you were to me, he went on. You were the only real thing I had. There it was. The reach. The hook. Ruth had been right. I'm glad you're reflecting, I said calmly, but you don't get access to me anymore. A pause. You don't hate me? He asked. No, I replied honestly. I don't. Relief flooded his voice. Then maybe, but I don't owe you peace, I continued. You'll have to make your own. Silence. Then a quiet, defeated exhale. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry, he said. I know, I replied, and I hung up. That was the moment I knew I was free. Not because he apologized, but because I didn't need him to. That evening, I sat in the living room and realized something else. Something Ruth had protected all along. She hadn't just been hiding evidence. She had been buying time. Time for me to grow into someone who could face the truth without breaking. Time for her son to reveal himself fully. Time for the right ending. The next morning, I made a decision. I sold the house. Not because it was tainted, but because it had served its purpose. It had held sickness and secrets and courage. I didn't need to stay rooted in proof of survival. I needed space for becoming. As I packed the last box, I found one final item tucked away in a drawer I'd missed. A small card, Ruth's handwriting. You were never meant to stay here. I smiled through tears. Some women inherit houses, some inherit money. I inherited truth and the strength to walk away from it. I left the house on a quiet morning, no ceremony, no audience, just the sound of tape peeling from cardboard boxes and the hollow echo of rooms that had finally let go of me. I walked through each space one last time, not to mourn it, but to thank it. The kitchen where I learned endurance, the bedroom where I learned loneliness, the backyard where truth rose from the ground and demanded to be seen. Closed the door gently behind me, not because I was afraid to slam it, but because anger was no longer my language. I moved to a small coastal town 3 hours away, somewhere anonymous, somewhere my past didn't precede me. I rented a modest house with white walls and wide windows that let the light pour in without permission. Every morning, I woke to the sound of waves instead of accusations. Every night, I slept without rehearsing defenses in my head. At first, the quiet felt wrong, too open, too forgiving. Then I realized something unsettling. Peace feels unfamiliar when your body has been trained to survive chaos. So I learned again. Slowly. I found work at a local nonprofit, not because I needed the money, but because I needed meaning that wasn't wrapped in obligation. I helped women navigating grief, betrayal, displacement. I listened more than I spoke. And when I did speak, I didn't offer solutions, I offered truth. Some afternoons, I'd walk along the shore and think about Ruth. Not with resentment, with clarity. She had been a complicated woman, edged, proud, flawed. She had raised a man who learned how to lie before he learned how to love. And yet, in the end, she chose to interrupt that cycle. With me. I understood now what her final gift truly was. Not the evidence, not the money, not even the warning. It was trust. She trusted me to see the truth and not look away. She trusted me to finish what she couldn't. She trusted me to survive the cost of knowing. Months passed, then a year. The investigations concluded quietly: plea agreements, financial restitution, professional consequences. No dramatic trial, no headlines this time, just accountability delivered through systems designed to move slowly and deliberately. I never attended the hearings. That chapter wasn't mine anymore. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. I hope you're well. I'm learning how to live without hiding. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I lost. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not as a wound. As a reminder, understanding is not the same as change, and change doesn't require my presence. That night, I dreamed of the oak tree. Not the hole, not the box. Just the tree, strong, rooted, quiet. When I awoke, I knew something had settled permanently. I was no longer the woman who waited. I was the woman who chose. On the anniversary of Ruth's death, I went back briefly, not to the house, to the cemetery. I stood before her grave with no anger left to give. You were right, I said softly, about all of it. The wind moved through the trees like an answer. Before leaving, I placed a small stone on her headstone, not as tradition, but as promise. I would not forget, but I would not be defined by what tried to bury me. As I drove away, I thought about that year, the year my husband was gone, the year I bathed a dying woman who once despised me, the year I gave without knowing I was being prepared. People still ask me sometimes quietly, carefully, if I regret staying, if I regret caring for Ruth, if I regret digging. I always answered the same way: no, because that year didn't take my life, it gave it back to me. It taught me that loyalty without truth is self-erasure, that love without accountability is a cage, and that, sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is listen to a dying voice and act. I don't tell this story to be admired. I tell it because somewhere, someone is standing at the edge of a truth they're afraid to uncover. Someone is being told to stay quiet, to be patient, to endure. And I want them to know something Ruth taught me: too late but not too late for you. If someone tells you to dig, it's because what's buried was never meant to stay hidden. And neither were you.